everybody, I'm Natalia Bonner. Welcome to the 9 Patchalong 3.0 block number 8. Today I'm actually going to be using 3 different rulers, my mini 4-in-1, my mini inside out, and my regular sized 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler. Now you could probably technically accomplish this with just the minis, but if you do have a regular size 4-in-1, pull that out and let's use it in today's block. Before we get stitching though, don't forget you can pick up your companion workbooks. We have a piecing workbook and a design workbook that are companions to this free stitch along, available on our website, pieceandquilt.com. Let's hop over to my machine and let's get stitching. I'll start out block number 8 by using my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler with some ruler grip tape on the bottom side of it and stitch in the ditch through the center of my block. Now I have already gone through and stitched in the ditch around the outside of my block. I did that as I quilted those borders and sashings. Now it's time to work on the actual center of the block. I will tell you that most often I do not quilt my borders and sashing first, but just for the sake of this stitch along, I did go through and quilt all of those first. If you are working on a sit-down machine or a domestic type machine, you might actually want to stitch your borders and sashing first, as they'd act like a really good basting, and then you can come back and work on your blocks. All right, so once I have my stitch in the ditch work complete, I'm going to start working back and forth between my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler and my mini inside out. We're going to go through, very similar to what we did on block number 7, and stitch point to point curves. So I'll start out with my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler and stitch across that first block to the opposite corner. Then I'll switch to my mini inside out machine quilting ruler and switch back to where I started. Anytime you're working with rulers, you want to hold your ruler so it's 1/4 of an inch away from where your thread will intersect. So I'm lining up my rulers, holding it a little bit away, 1/4 of an inch away. You will notice if you look real closely, sometimes I don't have my ruler lined up as perfect as it should be. In these cases, then I just slightly adjust my ruler as I'm stitching along, and usually you'll end up with a great design and nobody will ever know that you had to adjust your ruler as you are stitching along. So I'm going to continue stitching. You can see how I work all the way through my block on this particular 9 patch. I'm stitching a little bit more as a continuous line design. So on many of the other blocks, I've had you break it down and focus on one small square at a time. This is an example of when I kind of treat the block as a whole instead of individual blocks. So I'm going to continue on stitching each of those blocks. Now notice when I do travel and work in my ditches, I'm using my mini inside out machine quilting ruler for some of those lines. When I use that ruler for my straight lines, notice how I use those notches on the end of that ruler. I line those notches up with the ditch. They're measured exactly 1/4 of an inch, so that will help me keep my stitching right in that ditch if I have those notches lined up with the ditch. Now I do a lot of machine quilting with rulers, so I don't always use the notches. I am pretty comfortable holding the 4-in-1 or any ruler, but those notches really are a great learning tool or a great helper. All right, so now we have our curved lines all stitched out. Let's dress this design up just a little bit more. So at this point, I am going to switch to my 4-in-1, my regular size 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler, only because it's a little bit longer. You could totally continue this design if you were using either one of the mini machine quilting rulers. Now I'm going to stitch right over the top of the stitching that I've already completed. So starting right where I had finished, I'm going to stitch some point to point straight lines through each of these blocks. So as I start out, I'm going to start out and I'll hold my 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler so the 1-inch marked line on that ruler intersects the opposite corner. I'll line the ruler up there, stitch to the center, then I'll stop with my needle in the down position, adjust my ruler, and continue on through those blocks. So as I'm going, right now I'm working on the row of 3. I started out with the row of 2, and I'll just work my way through my block. You'll see when I'm coming back down, back across the block, I'm actually just eyeballing where that 1-inch increment is. You can totally go through, you can add markings at that point. I like to show you though how you can use the markings on your ruler, and really there's a lot in quilting that you can pretty much eyeball. You know, obviously there are quilts where you want to become a little bit more precise and add more markings, but a lot of times eyeballing will still get the job done and you'll end up with great results. So now I've completed the second row that has 2 on it. Now I'm heading up to that individual block where I'm going to repeat the same process, stitching those point-to-point lines across my block, then coming back to where I started. Now, just because of where I started this point-to-point design, I do have one block that I need to travel back over and complete the stitching on. So I'll travel along my ditch to get right back to that point. And then at that point, I'm going to complete the stitching on this final block. I love how block number 8 turned out. It's just a fun variation using the curvature and the more geometric lines. Mix them up and have a lot of fun. Block number 8 was so much fun, but I can't wait to move on to block number 9.